Diddy, one of the biggest names in the music industry, is known for living a life of luxury. He has huge mansions, flies in private jets, and is surrounded by fans and friends. But on one difficult day, everything went wrong for him. He was in a courtroom, hoping to hear that he could go home after offering a massive $50 million bail. Instead, the judge said no. Diddy collapsed from shock, and this is the story of how that one moment changed his life forever. Diddy's attempt to stay out of jail. When Diddy was arrested, he wanted to avoid staying in jail at all costs. Jail is nothing like the life he was used to, and the thought of being locked up was terrifying for him. So he offered the court a deal, a huge deal. He and his lawyers put together a $50 million bail package. That's a lot of money, even for someone as rich as Diddy. He offered to give up his $48 million mansion in Miami, which is filled with all the luxury you could imagine. He also offered his private jet, which he had used to fly all over the world. But it didn't stop there. Diddy's family stepped in to help too. His mom and other family members co-signed the deal, showing how desperate they were to get him out of jail. They were ready to do whatever it took. Diddy also promised to give up his passport so he couldn't leave the country, and he said he would stay under home arrest. This means he was willing to stay locked inside his house as long as he didn't have to go to jail. He even agreed to let the court test him regularly to make sure he wasn't doing anything wrong. With all of this, Diddy's lawyers were confident that the judge would accept the deal. But even though Diddy was ready to give up so much, the judge still said no. This was a huge blow to Diddy, who wasn't prepared for the news he was about to hear. Why the judge rejected Diddy's offer? So why did the judge turn down such a massive offer? Well, the judge had a lot of concerns about Diddy. The prosecutor, who is the person trying to prove why someone should stay in jail, said that Diddy couldn't be trusted. They brought up events from Diddy's past that made him look like someone who could get into trouble again. One of the big things they talked about was a situation involving Diddy's ex-girlfriend, Cassie. A few years ago, Diddy was involved in an argument with Cassie at a hotel, and it didn't go well. The prosecutor showed messages where Diddy was panicking and asking for help because he didn't want to get caught by the police. He even paid the hotel a lot of money to erase some security footage that showed what had happened during the argument. This made the judge think that Diddy might try to interfere with the case, just like he did before. The court also worried that Diddy's wealth and power could allow him to hide evidence or influence witnesses, which means convincing people to say or do something to help him in court. Because of all this, the judge decided that Diddy's offer wasn't enough. They were afraid that even if Diddy gave up his mansion, jet, and passport, he still had too much power and could find ways to get himself out of trouble. So, the judge denied his bail, which meant Diddy had to stay in jail. The moment of collapse. When Diddy heard the judge's decision, it was clear that he wasn't ready for it. He had probably been hoping that with all the money he offered, he would get to go home. But when the judge said he had to stay in jail, the news hit him hard. Imagine how it must feel to think you're about to go home and then find out you'll be locked up instead. It's like having everything you've ever known taken away in an instant. People in the courtroom said Diddy's face completely changed. His usual confident, calm look disappeared, and he looked scared and shocked. His hands were shaking, and it seemed like he was in disbelief. The weight of everything that had been happening to him finally crashed down on him. And then suddenly, he collapsed. His body gave out from all the stress and emotion. He couldn't handle it. The courtroom was silent as paramedics rushed to help him. Everyone watched as Diddy, who had always been in control of his life, was now lying on the floor, completely broken by the news. It was a powerful moment, showing how even the strongest people can crumble when life gets too tough. From a life of luxury to a jail cell, Diddy's collapse wasn't just because of the shock. It was also about realizing how much his life had changed. He went from living in mansions and flying in private jets to facing time in a tiny jail cell. For someone who was used to luxury, this was probably the hardest thing he had ever faced. In jail, there are no silk sheets, fancy clothes, or delicious meals. Instead, you have a hard bed, basic clothes, and food that's far from what Diddy was used to. The jail he was sent to, the Metropolitan Detention Center, is known for being one of the worst jails in the country. It's dirty, overcrowded, and the conditions are terrible. In the winter, the cells are freezing cold, and in the summer, they are unbearably hot. Some inmates go days without clean water or even a proper shower. For someone like Diddy, who had lived his entire life in comfort, this was probably like a nightmare. He was used to having everything he wanted whenever he wanted it, and now he had nothing. His world had shrunk from big mansions to a small, cramped cell, and that's something no amount of money could fix. Losing control. Diddy was always a man in control. He controlled his career, his life, and even the people around him. But in jail, all that control was gone. He couldn't decide what to do or where to go. He couldn't leave his cell or make any decisions about his life. For someone like Diddy, who was used to calling the shots, this must have been incredibly hard to accept. Jail isn't just about being locked up. It's about losing your freedom and control. And for Diddy, that loss of control was probably one of the hardest parts of being in jail. He had always been able to use his money and power to get what he wanted. But now, none of that mattered. The court didn't care how rich or famous he was. They only cared about the law. And that was something Diddy couldn't escape. The loneliness of solitary confinement. To make things even worse for Diddy, he was placed in solitary confinement. This means he was locked in a small cell all by himself for 23 hours a day. He only got out for 1 hour to walk around a tiny yard, but even then, he was alone. There was no one to talk to, no one to comfort him, and no one to help him through the tough times. Being alone for that long can have a huge effect on a person's mental health. It can make you feel sad, scared, and hopeless. For someone like Diddy, who was used to being surrounded by people all the time, the loneliness must have been overwhelming. Diddy's uncertain future. As Diddy sat in his jail cell, he probably thought about what his future would look like. If he was found guilty of the charges against him, he could spend many years in prison. For someone who had lived such a grand life, the idea of spending years locked up must have been terrifying. People in the music industry were shocked by what had happened. Some of Diddy's friends and fans were worried about him, while others wondered if this was the end of his career. On social media, people shared their thoughts, with some supporting Diddy and others thinking that his fall from grace was well-deserved. The life forever changed. For Diddy, everything changed in that courtroom. 1 minute, he was offering millions of dollars, believing he could buy his way out of trouble, just like he had done in the past. He was confident, thinking that his wealth and power could fix this situation, as they had so many times before. But when the judge said no and rejected his offer, it was like the ground beneath him crumbled. The life Diddy had known, one filled with luxury, fame, and constant admiration, was suddenly slipping away. This moment was more than just a legal defeat for Diddy. It was a harsh reality check that no amount of money could save him. He went from living a life of luxury, with private jets and mansions, to a cold, small jail cell. For someone used to being in control, it must have felt like his world was collapsing. Diddy's downfall wasn't just physical. It affected him emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. In the courtroom, he realized he wasn't untouchable. The power and security he had built around fame and wealth crumbled, leaving him vulnerable. A warning for all of us. Diddy's story is a powerful reminder that no matter how rich or famous you become, you're never fully protected from the consequences of your actions. He lived a life of luxury, but his mistakes eventually caught up with him. His downfall shows that even the most successful people can face harsh realities. For young people, it's a lesson that fame and money can't solve every problem. Diddy's fall from grace highlights the importance of making responsible choices, as no one is above the law or immune to life's challenges.